CWB Resource Group. We're headquartered in Cheshire, Connecticut, and I'm going to be talking with you about interpersonal style and stress. And so this afternoon for our Tuesdays at 2, I'm going to look at exploring our interpersonal styles. And even though I come from the DISC world, which is a certain tool that helps us understand styles, there's also Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, lots of different tools out there. So today I'm going to be talking about interpersonal styles in a more generic way because the models and the information are similar, and the foundation of those models is similar. We're going to look at what the motivators and stressors are for our different interpersonal styles, and then therefore what are some strategies for connecting and reducing that tension, particularly during these times of high stress. So as I mentioned, I'm Celeste Barro, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my background, and then we can jump in, and after we do the first activity, it'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the group as well. I've been in the area of training and development for over 30 years, and one of the things I enjoy most about my work is interacting with people. So as we move through the styles, you'll see that where I get a lot of my energy is by being around people. So now I'm learning that my Zoom virtual interactions are giving me a lot of energy as well. And the work that I do includes not only training and development in terms of virtual training or live training, but also coaching. So I'm an IPEC certified coach, and I work with individuals or groups. In fact, right now I'm working with a leadership team and coaching them as they move through some unprecedented changing times. So that's a little bit about my background. I had the opportunity to join the chamber in the summer of last year, of 2019, and it's just been fabulous. I can't say enough about the members of the Greater Valley Chamber. Everyone is so welcoming, so supportive. And we've got two of the best right here on with us, Laura and Nancy. So great organization, and I'm excited to share some information with all of you today. So I'm going to start with an activity, and then when I ask for a little input from you, then we'll get a chance to hear who you are, and everyone can introduce themselves with some describing characteristics. So we're going to start with an activity. If you want to get a piece of paper and just write down most and least, just like I have down at the bottom of the slide here. So it could just be a scrap piece of paper, most and least, 2 columns, all right? I'm going to show you 4 different sets of cards, actually 3 sets of 4 cards. So there's going to be a total of 12. 4 cards will show on the screen, and they're going to have different characteristics. So think about if I dealt these cards out to you and select one that's most descriptive of you and one that you would say is less descriptive or perhaps not descriptive of you. So is everybody ready? Ready to go on? Okay, so first set of 4. So when you look at these characteristics, you see risk taker, trusting, high standards, and sincere. So out of those 4, I want you to select one that's most descriptive of you, write it in the most column. One that's least descriptive, write it in the least column. Now it might still describe you, but it's less descriptive than the other characteristics on the screen. All right. I'm going to show you another set of 4. We ready to go on to the next set of 4? Would anybody like me to pause? Okay, let's go on to the next set of 4. Notice there are 4 different characteristics here. One that's most, one that's least descriptive of you. Again, write that down on your piece of paper. Competitive, confident, systematic, good listener. And now your last set of 4. You ready? Direct, sociable, fact finder, and patient. One that's most descriptive, one that's less descriptive. So each of you has a sheet of paper with 3 characteristics in the most column and 3 characteristics in the least column. And it might look like this. So looking at that list, now I want you to whittle it down. Circle one that you would say is most descriptive, so you're prioritizing. And circle one that you would say is least descriptive. And now I want to give you a chance to tell us who you are so everybody knows who's on the call this afternoon on our Tuesday at 2. And what I'd like you to do as you introduce yourself is select one of those, whether it's the one from the most column or the one from the least column, whichever one you want to share with us. And what does this look like for you? How does this show up? So who'd like to jump in first and introduce themselves and share a characteristic? Steve?
Yeah, this is Steve. Sociable is what I'm most.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so how does that show up for you, particularly now during these times?
Still, even though I'm doing it on Zoom, I'm still very talkative, very excited, very outgoing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. So you're demonstrating that even through your virtual world. Terrific. Thanks. All right. Who's going to jump in next? Karen, how about you? You ready to tell us a characteristic?
Sure. I tossed it around a little bit, but I was tossing between sincere and sociable, and I went for sincere.
Okay. All right. So you'd say that's most descriptive of you. What does that look like during your virtual world right now?
I think it's reaching out to people in a very authentic and caring way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really sincerely when I have to keep in touch with people. It's part of my job, but really my question is, how are you? And I do feel that sincerely. It's really not about an upcoming project. It's about just being a good person and doing the right thing. And all the people that I interact with on a regular basis through my job, trying to keep in touch with them and check in on them.
Mm-hmm. All right, great. Thanks a lot, Karen.
Sure.
All right. Who's up next? Laura, you want to jump in?
Sure. Laura Gorman, Membership Director for the Valley Chamber. And one of my most that I circled is systematic, which I kind of think goes sort of hand in hand when I think of the word systematic with like details and schedules.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ask me what it looks like now, I'm trying to get into that routine because I don't like not having a system in place. So I think I'm getting better, but I'm not like I was before when everything was exactly, ask Nancy, she makes fun of me. Everything was, just this is what I do. I'm like a 90-year-old. I think they have, they eat the same thing every day. I have my systems and now I'm messed up a little, but I'm not getting stressed out about it. I'm just redoing my system.
There you go. Okay, great. Yeah, but you can almost see how sometimes our natural tendencies start to impact that stress level. Great. Thanks, Laura. All right, so let's see. We have some other folks. John, tell us who you are and give us a characteristic. Oh, I can't hear you, John.
I have to turn off the mute button on my phone as well as Zoom. That
Oh.
I feel like three weeks of doing this at this point. You figured I would have figured that out by now.
That's right.
John Gover. I pick sincere, and the reason why and how I've had to kind of reinvent myself is I'm in the sales business development role, and so I want to you can't prospect in similar ways that I maybe was able to do 6 weeks ago. So having to go out and give as much help and advice and consultation to my to both clients and prospective partners has been kind of what's taken up my day to day.
Yeah. Thanks, John. All right, Tom, how about you? Oh, can't hear you.
Okay. So I'm a sales guy also. I'm with CAPS, a data center right in Shelton, right down the street from the chamber. And I'm a big fan of Laura's, but I'm opposite to Laura in that I would say one of my least capabilities or strengths is in the systematic side.
Mhm.
So that's sort of part just the way I've always run. I just sort of like chaos a little bit, and inefficiency is my middle name, but it is a bit of a challenge now. So I think being more systematic is something I have to focus in on a bit more, because I don't have as many incoming distractions that I can use to bounce off.
Ah, interesting. Okay, thanks, Tom. Good insights there. All right, how about you, Ruth? You want to tell us who you are and what characteristic did you want to share with us today?
I'll be honest, I'm zoomed out. So Celeste, I wasn't really anticipating doing any participation, but I will because you've called me out and you can't see me. So at least that's one advantage I have over the group. So I'm a party crasher. My friend Melissa invited me. I'm going to go with Tom and do a least because lots of the sociable stuff, but trusting, believe it or not, made the top of mind. And I think that during this time of uncertainty, that's just been exacerbated for me. So I find that I'm a very sociable creature, as you could probably guess, maybe, but I'm really struggling with that whole, when does this end? And yeah, so I think for me, that's a big one. Stress is higher than I've ever had it. I worked from home all my life. Well, I say all my life, but the bulk of the last 10 years. So it feels like all my life. And but now everybody else is home. It's much more stressful for me because I'm on Zoom about 80% of my day. So I'm zoomed out.
Yeah.
How's that for oversharing? Yeah.
No, that's great. Thanks. I appreciate you jumping in. Thanks, Ruth. Nancy, how about you? You can give us a chance to hear a characteristic from you as well.
Sure. I was kind of going back and forth, but I think I'm going to go with good listener on the most side, because this is a good time for me to be a good listener and hearing from our members and hearing from family and just taking that time to step back and figure out what they've got going on and if there's ways to help and so on. So I think being a good, it's hard though, because sometimes it is only through Zoom or only on a phone, and you don't get the same body language or those type of feelings in a lot of cases through these type of mediums, which helps with that listening piece.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The nonverbals, right? We can see it on Zoom, but the things that we feel we're in the same room with each other, we're certainly missing. Thanks, Nancy. Let's see, I have Melissa. I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and share a characteristic.
Yep. I'm Melissa Leonard. I'm the public access coordinator at Comcast in Seymour. And I would say I'm a fact finder. I think Google is, to me, the best thing since sliced bread. I'm constantly looking things up. And yeah, and I can't say it's any different now that I'm working from home, but that's my most strongest characteristic.
Yeah, good for you. See, that's where I'm not the strongest, and so that we would make good partners, right? You would have a strength that I don't have. Thanks, Melissa. So did I miss anyone? Anybody else on the call that I might have missed? I'm looking through the list here. Jump in if I missed you. All right, so thanks for doing that. So there's a lot of self-awareness flying around our virtual space right now. Can you see it? So why is the self-awareness so important? Why did we open with this exercise? Well, individuals who are effective and successful understand themselves. They know what it is that they do well, and therefore they can maximize it. When we understand ourselves, we know how our behavior impacts others, so we know where we need to do some adapting. And that's why the more we know about ourselves and the more we understand about ourselves, the better we can manage ourselves, and certainly the better attitude we tend to have. So the more we know about ourselves, the more confident and comfortable we feel, and therefore we project a much more positive image or positive attitude. So as we look at stress in our world today, understanding our interpersonal style and clearly knowing what those strengths are as many of you said in your introduction, where you had strengths or where you may have some areas that aren't a strength, but you're being called on doing those things now in our virtual world. So really understanding, what do we bring to the table and how can we maximize it? Where do we have some limitations? Because all of us have strengths and all of us have limitations. And what do we need to do about those limitations in order to be effective? And how are they impacting us in terms of stress? So that's what we really want to talk about today, is what's decreasing our stress, what's increasing our stress. Well, all of us are experiencing, you know, the same thing, yet we need to understand how we're experiencing that. So understanding how our own style is influencing the stress that we feel. So what's causing that stress is one thing. And then once we know that and we're aware of it, then we can begin to manage it, prepare for it. Some of you even started to talk about that, whether it's the structure or the lack of the socialization. So if we know these things about ourselves, we can manage them and then we can do something about them. What causes our stress level to go up? It's feeling out of control. And as many of us are feeling today, you know, we can't control the virus. We can't control any of the decisions that perhaps some of our lawmakers are making, but how we manage within those decisions, our own behavior, is something we have control over. And that's the piece that we really want to look at today, because otherwise we feel powerless and helpless, and that starts to increase our anxiety and ultimately can really lead to some despair. So we're going to continue to increase self-awareness. I know that Nancy talked about DISC. DISC is an assessment tool that we use at CWB Resource Group, but some of you may be Myers-Briggs folks or StrengthsFinder, or maybe you've never been introduced to any type of assessment tools. But no matter what tools out there, they're all based on the same basic model, which looks at interpersonal styles. So we're going to look at that in a moment, because we may be experiencing the same thing, right? A global pandemic, but how we experience it is very different. So some people may be enjoying this time. They're spending more time with their pet, their family. They're getting out for a walk and exercising and really enjoying that time, or downtime, as some people may be calling it. For some of you, this is what social distancing might look like to you. Maybe there are 5 of you living in a 1-bedroom condo or apartment, and you're on top of each other. And so suddenly everyone's home, including all the pets. Maybe even your children have come back who have moved away, and everybody is on top of each other. So our experiences are very different, and that's going to impact our stress level in different ways. So for me, for example, I don't have a house full of people. Our 2 children are not with us, and that's increasing my stress level because they're 25 and 27, and they come and go, and they're working. And so of course I worry about them, and that increases that stress level. So let's look at our interpersonal styles. So basic, simple model, 2 simple questions. Here's what I want you to think about. Would you say, are you fast-paced and outspoken, or cautious and reflective? So that's a basic model that says some people are more fast-paced and outspoken, some are cautious and reflective. As we look at the other quadrants on our model, some people are more questioning and skeptical, and others may be more accepting and warm. And that forms our 4-quadrant model. And each of us lives somewhere in this model. And so based on those 2 simple questions today, I'm going to go over them again. I want you to jot down this simple model on a piece of paper and put where you think you live on the model. So are you fast-paced and outspoken, or cautious and reflective? I'm going to give you a chance to just write that down or put the initials there. So it's a forced choice, fast-paced and outspoken, or cautious and reflective. Then I want you to answer the second question. Would you say you're questioning and skeptical, or accepting and warm? Again, forced choice, you need to pick one. All right, so let's say you said You were fast-paced and outspoken. That was your answer to the first question. Your answer to the second question was questioning and skeptical. So that means you're in this region of the DISC map or our interpersonal styles map. So whether we use a certain vendor or product name, this is a basic social styles map. And so somewhere here where I place the dot might be where your personal style falls. If you said you were fast-paced and outspoken, but accepting and warm, your personal style might be here. If you said, nah, you know what, I'd say I'm more cautious and reflective and accepting and warm. If your answers were those two, then you might live more in this area of our interpersonal styles map. And lastly, if you said, I think I'm more cautious and reflective, but questioning and skeptical, then you might live in this region of our interpersonal styles map. We're a blend of all four of those, but understanding what our natural tendencies are, what do we lean toward, what are our needs and preferences, help us understand how we can manage our stress and how we can help others in our world work with us in a way that reduces stress and helps us be more productive and effective. So no matter where people are in this interpersonal map, they might be here, they might be there, maybe they're here, maybe they're over here, or here, way over here, or here, maybe even here. No matter where you placed yourself on this interpersonal map, it's all good. There isn't any one placement that is better than the other. It's just different. So we're different from each other in a lot of ways. We're all experiencing a pandemic. We're all experiencing social distancing, but we're experiencing it in very different ways because we are different from each other. And different doesn't equal wrong. It just equals different. And that's very important for us to understand as we look to manage stress in our life, especially as you work with others in your organizations and even at your housemates, is to understand that we're each different from each other and that that's okay. So let's understand these styles a little bit further. What are the motivators and what are the stressors for each of the styles? So I'm going to cover motivators and stressors and give you some information on that. And certainly jump in if you have a question, feel free to do that. So I'm going to move to motivators. You ready for that? Okay, so if you placed yourself somewhere in this quadrant, remember fast-paced and outspoken, questioning and skeptical, or maybe there's somebody in your work life or your personal life that you believe lives somewhere here on the interpersonal map, then these are individuals who tend to be motivated by initiating change. So you might think, well, right now, maybe that's very motivating for this style. Well, notice the word initiating. So we didn't initiate this change, right? I don't think anybody on this call initiated this change. And so for this style, that can help cause the style to feel out of control. And being in charge and in control is a main motivator for this interpersonal style. This is also a style that likes to keep things moving, wants to get things done. And a lot of stuff is on hold right now. So that can really increase the stress level. This is the style that likes to make key decisions. And in our virtual world, sometimes we may find that there's not as much collaboration happening. You may be left out of a decision because decisions have to be made so quickly and on the fly. And not everybody on the team may be involved in the decision making. Yet this is a style that likes that and likes to push people also, not only to make decisions and get things done, but to reach their full potential. Maybe you're a parent at home pushing your child to get that homework done, study for the SATs extra because they've been delayed. And that may be what drives you, but that doesn't necessarily drive every style. So what are some of the stressors for people who live in this area of the interpersonal styles map? Well, it's adhering to strict rules and protocols. And that's what we're all doing right now. And we're going to have to continue to adhere to very strict rules and protocols for our safety. This is a style that doesn't like when the authority is challenged. And in many ways, we're not the decision makers. So authority may be challenged for some of you if this is a region where you live. This is a style that doesn't like that methodical step-by-step approach. And some of you get a lot of energy from that. So notice that what may be a stressor for some interpersonal styles is actually a motivator for some of you. Being faced with inefficiencies, you know, I heard Laura talk a little bit about being systematic. Well, this is a style that when things are inefficient, certainly creates stress for this style, because that means things might have to slow down. This is a style that if the person needs to pay attention to the emotional needs of others, boy, that's going to increase their stress level. And that's what we're all doing right now, is not only our own emotional needs, but the needs of others. So I'm going to stop for a moment. This is the style that tends to be fast-paced and outspoken, questioning, and skeptical. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any comments or questions on this interpersonal style.
Are you going to share the slide, Celeste?
Yes, well, what I know that Laura and Nancy are recording this, so that will all be recorded. That's the way it'll be shared.
Okay. And are you going to recap, because we're spending a great amount of time and it's awesome to understand each style, but how best for us then to approach this type of person if it's not our norm?
Right, right. So at the end, there will be a few other tips, but yet a couple of, and that's a great question, a couple of quick tips right here. First of all, this is a style that likes to move fast and likes you to be very direct and straightforward. So rather than beat around the bush, if there's something you need to say, feedback you need to give, directions, information, be very straightforward with this style. No beating around the bush. Another tip for interacting with this style to keep those stress levels down is to not be overly emotional. So we can talk about our emotion with this style. It's about how does that emotion relate to the results or getting work done. And that's really what the style's about. It's bottom line oriented, get it done, get it done. So if I'm talking about how I was left out of a decision, how did that impact the ultimate decision? That's what this style is going to want to know, and not necessarily be as concerned about how you felt about being left out, but why being left out impacted the decision. So those are a few quick tips there.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, let's go on to the next style. So now, if you're more fast-paced and outspoken, but accepting and warm, so you move into this region of the disc map, and the things that may be more, or our interpersonal map. And these are some of the things that are a little more motivating for you. So meeting new people. Well, right now we're meeting new people through Zoom, if we're meeting anybody new at all. So there's an opportunity through our coffee chats to meet some new folks. So if you live in this region, this is a way for you to harness some of those things that motivate you. This is a style that likes to be the center of attention. And when there aren't a lot of folks around, then this can be a style that starts to lose some of its motivation, some of their motivation. This is a style that likes to initiate new projects, and we know that many things are on hold. So as we look at the motivators being around lively and charismatic people and achieving immediate results and working towards those challenging goals, some of those things may still be part of our virtual world, and many of them are on the shelf right now. So as we look at the stressors for this style, giving unpleasant feedback, it's not easy to do even when we're face to face, but through a virtual space, it's even that much more awkward, clunky, and challenging. So if you would say you live in this region of this interpersonal map, this can be a big stressor for you. And being forceful or insistent. So as you manage or lead others in a virtual space, keeping people on task, making sure work is getting done, as well as, you know, attending to people's personal feelings is important, but it's a stressor for the style when you need to be insistent and forceful. It's a stressor for the style to be isolated for long periods of time. That's exactly what's happening to some folks. So if you are alone, living alone, or if you're leading others who are alone and don't have housemates, roommates, or others to interact with, this can really be a high stressor for this style. and not being able to move at a fast pace. So having to slow down the pace and maybe even possibly face failure. So as we look at some businesses closing their doors, asking people to take a reduction in pay, these are some things that the style may see as a failure, and that can really increase that stress level for this style. Let me pause for a moment, see what questions are on this style, motivators or stressors, and I'll give you some additional tips as we move through these. All right, so remember, this is a style that's lively, likes to interact. So if you live in this space, then the Zoom may be something that you're enjoying. And even if we get a little tired, Zoom tired, finding ways to, whether it's FaceTime or just a phone call. I know that I tend to live in this space and the previous space on our interpersonal map, and I do get Zoom exhaustion. So sometimes I want a phone call without a FaceTime. I don't always want everybody to see me, but I do like to interact with others. So check on folks who you believe may represent the style. They need a lot of social interaction. Let's move over here. What if somebody is cautious and reflective and accepting and warm? So they're also on that people feeling side of the interpersonal styles map. But this is a style that moves in a much more cautious, calm pace. They like a stable environment. And our environment is anything but stable today. We don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring. So it's hard to plan. This is a style that likes to develop very orderly plans. And we all know that best laid plans are likely going to change. Yes, Laura, that's you. Yeah. Supporting others. That's you, Laura, as well. So looking for ways to support others. Now, strengths overused can become a weakness. So if supporting others is something that really drives you, what can happen to this style is that you're carrying the burdens of everyone else. So you want to be careful of that. Support your team, and supporting those that are important in your personal life is a good thing to do. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So this is a style that likes to work with others, be with others, create those systems and procedures, and help support the team. And this may be the individual team member who can create all those systems so everybody can stay in touch in a virtual way. So what creates stress if this is where you live in the interpersonal styles map? Well, it's dealing with those argumentative folks. When somebody really gets pushy and angry, and because of our stress level, we're going to come across that to some extent, right? Some people, their stress levels go up very high. Managing in a chaotic and ever-changing environment, wow, isn't that exactly what we're doing? So for this particular style, that's very high. That creates a lot of stress. Negotiating some power struggles as you work in virtual ways, and maybe not always being in on decisions. Having to be forceful and insistent is going to create stress for this style. Giving orders. So if you're trying to keep your team on task, trying to keep the kids focused on their homework, this is a style that is less assertive, and when you need to assert can increase those stress levels. If you're unable to express yourself, that's going to cause stress for the style too. So if this is a style that you have team members that represent, they're going to want to have a place to be able to express themselves in a very safe way. All right, any questions on that style before I move on to the next one? All right, let's take a look at our fourth quadrant. So if you said you were cautious and reflective, but questioning and skeptical, then you may live here on our interpersonal map. So what are some of the things that are motivators for you? Well, similar to what I just talked about, it's systems and procedures. So Laura, I see you in both those quadrants a little bit, right? You like those systems and procedures. This is also, in this quadrant, what really motivates this style is high standards. So you may be setting very high standards and parameters for our virtual work world when some people are struggling just to get by each day. So keep that in mind as you work with others. And this is a style that likes rationale. So it's not about colorful, fun projects. It's about rational ideas And it's about quality, ensuring that the work is accurate and that there's still precision even in our virtual work world. So checks and balances are important. This is a style that likes to work independently. So in our virtual world, this style can flourish, be comfortable with that. It's a style that typically likes to work more independently, even when we came together in our old work world. But working independently is something that the style gets motivated by and likes to create a very reliable setting. Well, reliable and stable are not necessarily the word of the day. So the stress factors for this style is that chaotic environment, making decisions without careful time for analysis. You know, things are changing so quickly, you're making decisions on the fly, and that's going to increase the stress level for this style. So the opposite of somebody who lives across our interpersonal map, where if somebody's more fast-paced and outspoken and accepting and warm and they live over here, they're fine with that fast pace. But with this style, being cautious and reflective, a faster pace can be unsettling. Being wrong or unprepared, having to create a collaborative environment. And that's what we're looking to do. So if this is a style that you represent, being invited to all of these Zoom cocktail parties and trying to get together with people on FaceTime may be increasing your stress level. But for work, creating those collaborative environments is very important to getting results. Keep in mind that this is a style that's going to get Zoom exhaustion much faster. This style, giving praise and recognition can cause stress. So again, doing it virtually only makes it that much more challenging. We don't want to stop doing it. Just keep in mind that it's going to create stress for you or for that style, depending on where you live on the styles map. I'm just going to pause for a moment, and I went through those quickly. See what questions you have on any of the motivators and stressors.
Celeste?
Yes.
It's Laura.
Laura.
Sometimes I see myself in all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could say one thing, one line or one motivator rather.
Mm-hmm.
One motivator there, one motivator there, a whole bunch there, one there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also home is different than work.
Mm.
So could you be, could I be, could people be, you know, of course, more than one, but a little bit of the others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great questions. Thanks, Laura. You know, we are a blend of all four. So research shows that human behavior basically falls into 4 quadrants or 4 buckets. And the way that we determine that is through those 2 simple questions or a full online assessment. So in our organization, we use the DISC online assessment tool, similar to some of you may have had experience with Myers-Briggs. So that'll help you figure out exactly where your dot is. But all those tools will tell us that, yes, we do represent all 4 styles, but we have a tendency to lean toward 1 or 2. So you tend to, Laura, lean towards that S or C, SC on the DISC map. For us here, without using our DISC letters, then it's more cautious and reflective, right? So you tend to live in the interpersonal model in this region. Sometimes a little more accepting and warm. Sometimes you might fall on the questioning and skeptical side and bring that to the workplace and your interactions. Does it look very different outside of work and inside of work? You know, I get that question a lot when we do these programs. Some people would say, absolutely, I'm totally different inside and outside of work. Well, we might think so or believe that, but it looks different just briefly. So for example, for me, I tend towards the region that's fast-paced and outspoken. So I like to socialize and interact with people, but I do that in my work. And so after I've been on Zoom all week, the last thing I want to do is be on a Zoom cocktail party. The last thing I want to do is do the whole family Zoom get together on Sunday night. And you would think I'd be the one initiating it. But because I've been doing that for a little while, my style looks different because I need to re-energize. But it doesn't mean my dot moved. It just means I needed a little energizing. So our interpersonal style typically stays with us from birth and all the way through our lifetime. Now, our behavior starts to look different because we've matured, we've got some education, we're wiser, we're more, all of those things. So we start to adapt our behavior, but the internal driver stays the same. Thanks, Laura. So as we look at motivators and stressors, what motivates you could actually stress somebody else out. And that's as you think about working with your teammates, and maybe your partner, your business partner, your partner at home. Think about the things that may be creating stress for them. So as we look at how do we then act during stressful times, well, if you tend towards that fast-paced and outspoken area or region on the model, you're going to tend to assert. And therefore, you're going to assert even more as your stress level goes up. So you're going to tell everybody how you feel, what you're thinking, what you're upset about, what you're excited about. And that can just start to be overwhelming, particularly for your housemates or your colleagues as you're having these virtual meetings. Individuals who tend towards the cautious and the reflective region on our interpersonal map tend to hold back and withdraw. And so if individuals are very quiet, maybe they're not participating in your team meetings, maybe they're not letting you know how they feel, because their natural style is to hold back. And that's when it may be helpful to do a round robin and really draw people out, or a separate phone call with somebody, just to make sure that they are okay. If you found that you leaned towards the questioning and skeptical side, then you might be somebody who focuses on the logic and the rationale and the task. So as you talk with folks, you may be checking in on tasks, but you're not checking in on how they feel. So if you tend to be one that leans towards the logic and the task, but the employee, the team member that you're checking on, tends to lean towards feelings and people, the first thing they want you to ask about is how they're doing. How do they feel today? And then get down to business, where you wanted to go right to the task. So as we think about where we might place ourselves on this interpersonal map, we focus on different things. When our stress level starts to go up, our behavior is harder to manage. And so when we assert, if we're somebody who's fast-paced and outspoken and questioning and skeptical, when you assert, that goes from being effective to being less than effective. Maybe you're now aggressive. Maybe your voice gets louder and you're actually shouting at somebody. And that impatience starts to come in. You refuse to bend on an idea. You can become critical of others. And so the strengths start to get overused. You want to move so quickly that maybe you miss some important details. If you leaned towards fast-paced and outspoken, but accepting and warm, then this is somebody who expresses their feelings. And so as stress levels go up, this is a style whose feelings are right at the surface, right? They're raw. They're going to tell you when they're excited, when they're upset. Maybe there's a lot of tears. Maybe in the beginning of this process, maybe now people's stress level are even higher because it's been going on for a long time. So what you might be experiencing from individuals on your team or even yourself is a lot of emotion, and not just talking about it, but becoming emotional. You might notice some sarcasm, maybe some finger pointing or blaming from this interpersonal style. Maybe the style starts to even gloss over some of those tensions. It's a style that's going to share their frustrations and may do that during team meetings. If you leaned more towards cautious and reflecting and accepting and warm, remember this is a style that it leans towards feelings. And so you're looking to support people, lift them up and help them. But you may avoid that tension, may not want to talk about how that feels. Things can sometimes start to simmer below the surface with this style because you're so concerned about helping others that you're not expressing what your needs are. And when those things start to simmer, that can be very unhealthy for us. If you lean towards cautious and reflective, but questioning and skeptical, you may be an individual who is moving towards isolating yourself, not accepting those team meetings, not wanting to interact with others, maybe being there, but not participating, becoming overly critical, maybe even passive aggressive. So saying, yep, I'll get that information to you. Sure, I'm going to attend that. I'll be there. And then not joining in. So those are some of the behaviors that you might be experiencing yourself, or you might notice them in some of your teammates. Now, this model shows us regular levels of stress and pressure. And as stress and pressure goes up, we're going to exaggerate those tendencies, as I just mentioned. But when it goes through the roof, which is where it is today for most people, the whole thing flips over. So notice what happened when I just clicked that. So I'm going to go back, right? Individuals who tend towards being fast-paced and outspoken will assert. Individuals who lean towards cautious and reflective will hold back. But when stress levels go through the roof, which is where they are now for many people, it switches. So individuals who used to assert might hold back, and individuals who used to hold back might assert. So you could actually see completely different behavior from someone. So I'm going to give you a quick example for me, outside of the pandemic, but a couple years ago, my mom passed away. So she was 84, had a beautiful life, and she died a couple years ago. And so for me, you would think I'd be out there asserting and telling people how I felt. And my stress level was so high that I held back. I pulled back. I didn't call people. I didn't return phone calls. I didn't want to email anyone. I literally didn't want to talk to anybody for 2 weeks. So when you notice this in someone, that means their stress levels through the roof and they need your support. If you notice this in yourself, then reach for healthy coping mechanisms, because that means your stress level is very high. So a couple things we can do to connect and reduce tension for ourselves and for others. So if you notice some teammates or housemates that lean towards this region of our interpersonal map, expect the candor. Somebody might be a little blunt, let it roll off your shoulders, right? This is a stressful time. Address issues quickly and be very direct, as I mentioned earlier. That's important when you're interacting with this style. So if you want to reduce tension with this style, be quick to the point. If you want to reduce tension with this style, be open to collaboration. Maybe throw ideas around. This is a style that likes to get creative. Remain optimistic, even in the face of all this uncertainty, and acknowledge the person's feelings. Ask about them, acknowledge them. I mean, if somebody talks for a long period of time and you want to focus on work, then summarize what you've heard and then redirect. Yet, paying attention to this person's feelings is the way that you're going to be able to get down to business. If somebody leans towards this region, here's a couple strategies for connecting and reducing tension. Show some warmth, be collaborative, show concern, right? Ask this person about how they're feeling as well, and avoid those forceful tactics. So be more collaborative, ask questions, get the person's input. And if person or you leans towards this place in the interpersonal styles map, expect some skepticism. This might be a style that says, oh, this is never going to end. We're never going to find a vaccine. So give the person some time to talk about that. Expect that skepticism. Maybe they're skeptical about the plan or the system that you want to put in place for reopening. So invite it and appreciate the skepticism, because it can help you create some good ideas and good plans. Give this style some space to process and think through things, and avoid being forceful, and certainly avoid those emotional tactics, because the more emotional you are with this style, the more this style is going to withdraw. So those are a few different strategies for connecting and reducing tension. Let me pause and see what other thoughts, questions, or comments you have. Okay.
I think that this, I think that, Celeste, when I think of this, I think that, in business settings, usually a whole team will do the disc. So you'll share those results and people will be well aware of it. And my biggest aha through all this is, how do you respond but not react because you're in a high stress situation. So this one slide of just recognizing you don't know what other people's discs are by default. And we're all faking it because we're on Zoom and we're trying to smile and we're doing our hair every day. And I just think that this is really the key, right? Which is you don't know where somebody falls. So you're reacting the way you think you would want to be approached, and it could be completely opposite. So anyways, that was my big aha.
Thanks, Ruth. That's a great point, that you may be reacting in a way that you want, right? We're all tuned into that same station. What's in it for me, right? With them, what's in it for me? So when, even on Zoom and even in this virtual world, ask those two basic questions. Is that team member of yours fast-paced and outspoken, or cautious and reflective? And you knew them before the pandemic, so they may be behaving differently because of their stress level, but their natural interpersonal style doesn't change. It's the behavior that's changing because of the stress. Remember, I said this flips over sometimes. So ask yourself those two questions. Is that team member fast-paced and outspoken, or cautious and reflective? Ask the second question, questioning and skeptical, or accepting and warm, and then put your two answers together. And that's where we can get a sense of whether that person falls a little more over here, a little more over here, or here, or here. And remember, we are a blend of all four. This starts to give us a sense of some of those characteristics and what the needs are of that individual, what their needs and preferences are. Little more tricky on Zoom, and that's why the check-ins are helpful, because we can see some of that nonverbal communication. Other comments or thoughts, questions? Okay. We aren't walking around with our needs written all over us. We don't have our DISC map tattooed on our forehead. We do provide DISC assessments, so if at any point you're interested in doing that with your team, we can certainly support you there. I can always send you a sample of a DISC report so you can see what the report out looks like. If anybody wanted more information, I'd be happy to talk about it offline. But because we don't have our needs written all over us, it's important for us to talk to each other. The more information we have, the more effective we're going to be. Remember, I said the number one reason why stress level goes up is that loss of control. So the more we know, right, information is power. The more we know, the more effective we're going to be. So share those needs and preferences that you have. And, I appreciated each of you talking about that in your introduction, those needs and preferences. What are your style characteristics? What are the ways that you want to work together so that you can decrease stress levels and continue to be productive during these unprecedented times? So that's
Very
some
good.
information on style, and I thank you for being here. I really, as I said, I get my energy by interacting with others, and you guys are energizing me just by being on the screen.
Thank you, Celeste.
Thanks,
And
Laura.
if one thing I take away